G'day everyone, welcome back to Free Kick on air for another week, this week being round 3 of the AFLW fantasy season. As always, I am more than ably joined by Jono. How are you, mate? You come down from the highest of highs this week with an all-time round ranking high, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a good time. There's something about fantasy when you're doing well, it's just a lot more enjoyable. So it's been a great week. Yeah.
I too enjoy having hobbies where I do well. It does generally make it easy. Oh, did I cut out there?
I think you might have, yeah.
I had just been saying that, certainly makes hobbies easier when you are doing well.
Yeah.
Let's jump right into the team, shall we? We'll probably talk about some of the injuries that have come up. We've also now had the Bonnie Toogood suspension confirmed, which was obviously the biggest news of the week. So we'll jump right into Essendon and Richmond. We've got a couple of changes for the Bombers. So Sophie van der Heuvel and Bonnie Toogood out, with Sophie van der Heuvel out for the season. And then in comes 2 rookies, Jess Verbruge and Amelie Gladman. And then for Richmond, Charlie Wicksteed, Ali Dalloway, Sierra Greaves. In and out go Lulu Beattie, Grace Egan and Beck Miller. The latter 2 both being injured. Up front, so we've got a number of cheaper options named. So Greaves, Verbruge, Gladman, and if memory serves us well, Charlie Wicksteed scored well points per minute, but hasn't exactly been. She's not highly priced this season. Are you leaning towards Greaves as the kind of number 1 rookie pick here?
Yeah, I think I'll let you speak to the Essendon too, but I really liked what I saw of Greaves in the preseason. Fairly high draft pick, and I do think that Richmond need to do something to change up what's been going on there at the club. I worry about Wicksteed just because that midfield role, I'd expect that Grace Egan, once she's fit and firing, probably comes back in. Whether that's for Wicksteed or Dalloway is kind of hard to say. But I think Greaves really showed something early, and I'd be hopeful that they can kind of get a good run in the next few weeks. I'm not sure how high the scoring is going to be, so I'm going to leave it a little bit just to see what it looks like. But I've definitely got my eye on Sierra this coming week. What do you think of the Essendon pair?
I really don't. I'm not rating either of them as high scorers for the minute. I think the biggest watch for me for the Bombers is just how they're going to go about dealing with having so few distributors off halfback. Obviously, Maddie Gay being down is a problem. Sophie van der Heuvel was probably next cab off the rank and had been kind of taking up a bit of that distributor role. She's now out. Looking at the team that we've named, there aren't any distributors on the bench. And the only one who's really done it before is Georgia Clark. But with the fact that Brooke Brown is also out, she sits in that team as the only kind of tall defender of note experience-wise. It's interesting that Jess Verbruge has been named off halfback. Just very hard to evaluate there because we have so little information and didn't really see much of either of them in the preseason. So I have my eyes on it just from a Bombers fan perspective, but there's a fantasy tinge to it all because there's always that advantage of high scoring when you do play in that halfback distributor role. So I think that if of the 2 of them, if the Bruges is actually playing off halfback, then that certainly presents as something interesting. I also won't be shocked if the decision is made to send Amy Gaylor back into defence, which probably fantasy relevant too. She's someone that was not highly popular, but certainly had some rumblings as a good, cheap midfielder, and really repaid those that held through a bad week 1 and she had a really great score last week. Probably the only other player who's had much time in defence as a distributor, even then, it's 7, maybe 8 games last year where she was playing that. So, going to be fascinating to kind of evaluate that one.
Yeah. It's awful timing for her because I feel like you don't want to interrupt a breakout year, which it looks like she was on the way to going to have, and now she might need to be moved back into that back line. I'm curious what they do.
I just feel like the Bombers have more versatility with their midfielders. Just kind of looking at the bench, I definitely feel more confident in what we could get from Chloe Adams and Brooke Walker as inside midfielders versus what we could get from alternative halfback options. So it's going to be high on my radar to watch this week. I know that another name that has been kind of flying around potentially as an option to bring in after a better score last week is Isabel Bacon. I'm of the view that all of the players that have been brought in are midfielders, and Bacon maybe scored better fantasy-wise last week, but that is one of the most disappointing midfield performances I've seen from the Tigers. I won't be shocked if Bacon is maybe not spending as much time in the middle at the moment, or at least until we see some improvement in her accumulation ability and also just a bit of a change as well in the team makeup.
Yeah.
Hello, Mel. Yes, welcome. We're delving right into the most important topics, having a bit of chat about Isabel Bacon.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, and I just have a point around the people that they're bringing in going straight into midfield. It's interesting with Grace Egan injured, and then Sierra Greaves being a 380k priced midfielder who could potentially, along with kind of Ali Dalloway, kind of slot into that midfield. Do you reckon that she makes for there's not too many midfielders. Actually, I don't know off the top of my head, but I don't think there's too many midfielders debuting this week. Does Sierra Greaves become a good, cheap target, or do we think it's a little bit risky, given they've got Dalloway joining as well?
We were just actually discussing this before you jumped on. I think we're both of the view that it's just a little bit too risky with the volume of other options. And I certainly noticed more of Greaves off a wing in the preseason until I think very late in that Hawthorn game. Same goes for the match simulation against Carlton. So on that basis, I'm probably having it just be watch and see for next week, not as confident in it being launched straight away.
Checks out.
So, yeah, and to kind of answer your question, of the rookies, kind of sub 400k players debuting this week, 3 of them are in this game. So of basement priced or below 400k players playing their first game, it's Greaves, Verbruge, Wicksteed, Joanne Craig, who we know and is not a great scorer. No. And then we'll talk about her a bit later, but Indiana West, who was an injury replacement player for Fremantle. So it's either this game for your rookie midfield downgrade or at least for a debut-wise, of playing first game of the season or bust.
Excellent. Love to have that for the first game. No pressure.
Yeah, no stress, no pressure. Moving across to GWS and Adelaide. Adelaide have come in with no changes. I'm assuming then they just reckon it'll be fourth quarter football from last week and just do that the entire time this week. GWS have got 2, omitted both Sophie Kavanagh and Grace Koch, and in come Jess Doyle and Daisy Walker. In terms of kind of the impacts of that up front, Grace Koch is a relatively popular bench option. It's a pity she plays the second game. It rules her out really as a looping option for captaincy. Unless you do have Mon Conti, or maybe you're someone who's gone with Jean Nanscorn or Maddie Prespakis, but that neither of those players have been particularly popular. So sadly, Grace Koch doesn't give us a whole lot of assistance on the captaincy front. In terms of kind of what to take away from this game, I'm certainly of the mind that the limited, well, I don't think there's going to be any changes in the balance in the midfield for GWS. It still shapes as a really good matchup for Marinoff for your captaincy, even if she's not hitting 140s at the moment. I don't think. Have either of you guys got North midfielders? Mel, you've got Riddell, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Have you considered at all going somewhere else and not picking Noffy?
Well, I was super excited about the red dot on Kosh until Jono pointed out to me that is in the same game as Noffy, so that does not really help me at all. But it's tempting. I feel like I've just enjoyed going up the ranks a little bit, and it feels like the risk-averse thing to do is keep it on Noffy, which I'm kind of wanting to do to stick with the norm and not kind of shoot myself in the foot. But I feel like we will see some more fragmenting of captain's choices this week, and Riddell is a great choice. So I haven't yet decided. It's either or for me.
Fair. Another player that I probably needed to talk about, Daisy Walker, who has played previously. So this is a 3-5K defender, has played some defence and wing previously at Carlton. Whilst I quickly look up what she's done scoring-wise, Jono, I know you've got Cambridge McCormick. I've got her as well. My guess is that Walker comes in and plays off half-back. Is it any concern for McCormick, or are you happy to just proceed and, well, are you are you trading her at this stage?
I don't think so.
I
have
my concerns over McCormick regardless. I was trading her out. So I think this has just sort of cemented my decision. I do think the Giants have a pretty set fixture down back. So I'm really not sure if Walker comes in to play more on the wing rather than at half back. But either way, I'm happy to trade out McCormick.
Yeah, that is fair enough. Well, in that time, I've managed to find that Daisy Walker last played in season 8, played 5 games, averaged 31 in 58% time on ground. Highest averaging season was season 6, which he played every game and averaged 43.5. It's okay. Points per minute is pretty solid in that 43.5 average season. I'm not trading her in even if she is super cheap, but she will be someone that I watch out for. I do definitely think that GWS lacks some composure, so the more experienced players they can get on the park, the better. And as far as I think that might be it. This might be a game where it's literally just about the players we already have, because I don't think we're going to be trying to trade anyone in from this game, are we?
Well, would you go Zali Goldsworthy if you hadn't already?
It's a good question.
What do you wait?
If it weren't for if you didn't go Zali last week and you also didn't go Woodland, and you're choosing between the two, I think I might just lean towards the fact that this matchup for Port Adelaide is so good that you might just have to go there. You might just have to go Woodland.
Yeah, I think you can wait, because I don't think Goldsworthy is going to have the ceiling score that you can be like, oh, now she's out of reach. She's already expensive. She's going to continue to be roughly that price, would be my guess.
Yeah, I do think, though, you'd want Zali by next week because GWS play Gold Coast.
We're just trading in whoever plays the Gold Coast at the moment.
Pretty much. Like, they were that bad. Yeah, I definitely think that's the play. On to the next game, St Kilda against Wallich Marrawah. In for Wallich Marrawah, Courtney Lindgren, Charlotte Riggs, and Sarah Lakai out go Amy Franklin, Dana Hooker, and Kaylee Kavanagh. For St Kilda, it's Liv Vesely and Hannah Stewart in. Out go Ariana Clark and Nat Plain. Biggest thing from this, as I have mentioned often, Daisy Pearce loves a ruck swap. I'm still yet to actually go back and look at every team announcement, but I swear to God, every 1 to 2 weeks, there has been a ruck named as an in or an out for the Eagles. It surely rules out McGrath as a trade-in target this week. If you already have her, would you trade out, or do you just ride this for 1 week, knowing that the only ruck opponent is Beck Ott?
I think if you already have I would just keep going with it. I wouldn't because it might change next week again, and I would
It probably will.
still
It
imagine
probably will.
McGrath is getting the majority of the time. In round one, I think Sarah Lakai only had something like 38% time on ground. So McGrath's still getting the majority of the time, but I definitely wouldn't be trading into it. That would scare me. I think Will has changed his plans since he's seen that. I'm not 100% confirmed, but I think he has.
I would be concerned if he hasn't pivoted at that point. The other big conundrum for me is just the fact that Liv Vesely and Hannah Stewart has come in. Is there maybe a bit of a switch in midfield balance? I feel like Tiana Smith and Choppy Lambert are the two first choice midfielders and probably among the 4 or 5 first players named in their positions on the team sheet for St Kilda. I have Georgia Patrikios.
Mm-hmm.
Are the sirens blaring with 2 midfielders coming in, even if both Stewart and Vesely have been bit part midfielders and both have played in other positions for quite a while? Or is this overreacting to team sheets and Patrikios is still going to play in the midfield? Because I'm concerned about this. If it wasn't a better matchup, I would be more heavily considering trading. Is it a case of if you're looking for cash to get rid of, is Patrikios the play?
I think if you're looking to put like fish on field, this could be a good opportunity to trade her out. But I wouldn't be, it doesn't scream like Panic Station's must trade to me. I think you'd be, like, you might not get an amazing score, but I don't think you're going to get something absolutely shocking from this because she has looked really good so far this year. I think she'll still continue to be used around the midfield, if not, just maybe not for the whole time.
Yeah. And I think as well, the advantage with this team is the volume of wingers that St Kilda have, which has been probably the most predominant position that Patrikios has had in the tenure of Nick Del Santo. So I think Basker and McDonald and Barr are the first choice wingers. The bigger concern for me is if it's half forward time, I don't love that at all. This would be a situation where if we did have handball receive numbers like we do for the men's, I would be able to kind of get a better sense for whether or not she was still really high up there, because often handball receives are a really great indicator for fantasy scoring. But alas, you have to go on kind of gut feel and maybe your own hand counting at the moment. I wouldn't be trading into Patrikios, let's put it that way. And I'm still actively considering trading her out as compared to trading out Serene Watson, who's currently the player that I'm using to get cash to upgrade Bonnie Toogood. And then I also think that just kind of with the team changes that have been named, I think Charlotte Riggs don't overreact to the fact that she's named a ruck. She's definitely a defender. And then also pinch hits forward as a junior, but probably spent a majority of her time in defence. So that's some champion data shenanigans that mean that she's been named as a ruck for fantasy.
How do you feel about Wrench named in the midfield? I know we don't read too much into this, but does that make her field worthy or is she relegated to the bench?
I think that this is a good matchup for Wrench. I think that it's going to be a kind of similarly paced game to probably closer, a game that's paced closer to what we saw against Gold Coast than what it was against Essendon. I think that Wrench is still going to be able to be benefiting. And if anything, kind of with Dana Hooking going out and the players that are coming in, I feel more confident now, or a little bit more confident, that Wrench isn't going to get thrown behind the ball, as had kind of been my concern last week.
Yep.
Moving along to Geelong and Sydney, only one change in this game, and it's Bridie O'Rourke out for Zali Friswell. In terms of the most fantasy relevant players this game, there is definitely a world where you bypass Woodland and go Molloy if you do have some really good team value, just based on, the fact that Molloy is scoring incredibly without the probably like 50% midfield role that we've seen her score best in the past. And at the beginning, I personally just attribute that lower midfield time to some recovery from her ACL. In what world would you bypass Woodland to get Molloy? Is it just a case of you've got the cash in the bank to do it and don't bother trading in someone who is probably going to score worse than Molloy? Or is this a case of, Molloy's had 2 great scores against 2 really easy opponents, and from here, it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, it worries me a lot that, she's not going to have 7 goals and 4 behinds every week. That's crazy figures. I worry about the sustainability of that as a scoring source. So what happens when she plays Geelong and she only kicks 2 goals? I think with Woodland, at least this week, you've got a pretty safe base. I think Molloy is good enough and she's in ripper form. There's a good chance she scores another 4 goals this week. But in the event she scores 1, I think she could put up like a 40 or a 50, while I think Woodland's base is higher than that this week. So just on a timing basis, I'd probably prefer to go Woodland this round. But I'm definitely looking at soon getting in Molloy, because I think long-term top 5 forwards almost locked up at this point.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Jono. Like, long-term, I want Molloy, but timing this week is just too juicy with Woodland not having gone up that much last week and a great matchup, and Molloy being quite expensive. If Molloy drops a bit after a less impressive game, which will, I'm sure, come at some stage, then that's when I can pick her up, with hopefully the cash I make from Woodland.
Thank you for jinxing it there. Molloy is going to go on a Bonnie Too Good 2023 style run and average 103 for the rest of the season and not have a single down performance. But in principle, yes, I do agree with you. I'm of a similar view, but I similarly think that, as I said, if you do have really good team value and you see yourself being in a position to consolidate your best 21 players or best 17 players, best 16, quickly, I wouldn't be against just going up to Molloy and avoiding any additional trades, particularly if you aren't desperate to search for team value. I also think that Montana Ham, great forward option if you don't have her already. I think she's looked excellent. She's only going to continue to go up in price at this rate. I think the role is excellent for her. I think she's got a better role than Molloy, and it kind of showed with the fact that she could score without kicking 7. She scored 133 last week. So if you are looking to go more expensive and you don't have Ham, I would go there before Molloy. On then to the next game, we've got Gold Coast up against Yarrtapulti. For the Power, it's Amelie Borg in, Jasmine Stewart out. And then for the Suns, Reece Shaw's clearly been watching what Daisy's been doing and has made a ruck change for the 3rd week in a row. Taylor Gregory in alongside Clara Fitzpatrick and Jack Tupai, and out go Lauren Bella, Wallace Randell, and Ella Smith. We've kind of already talked a lot about Ash Woodland. Kind of at the end, we'll answer some questions. I know that it's going to be her name pops up a few times in trade plans. If you're sitting there in this game, I'm personally relieved that Matilda Schultz is my ruck at the moment and Lauren Bella hasn't been named. I think that's a massive benefit. The big question for me is, what does the inclusion of Jack Tupai do for Havana Harris? Because that's my biggest question coming into this game. I think that there's very much a world where Tupai provides a better structure and probably a better chance of Gold Coast winning. They can actually retain the ball a little bit more. But the kind of possessions and spots that Tupai get to are very similar to the ones that Havana Harris was in when she scored really well in week 1. I haven't formed a view yet on whether or not it's better for her that Tupai's playing or not. Does anyone have any strong opinions there?
Yeah, I mean, my view is that if you're bringing in a player off injury and you've got two key forwards, I mean, I know Darcy Davis is in the team as well, but I think Dupai and Harris have shown themselves to be really, really promising targets. I think you play the one who's coming off the knee injury deeper forward, and you let the other one roam. So overall,
even if the other one
Harris
is a rookie
further up the field.
Yeah, and like, is it enough to say that if you've got Piper Dunlop and you've got Havana Harris as your two rucks, as a number of teams currently do, would you be fielding? I think I'd be fielding Harris, but is that kind of the consensus view that it's not going to affect her enough, and it's still going to be a good enough matchup that Harris is going to be the better scorer, or is Dupai enough of a flag? Mel, I know you're probably the preeminent Jack Dupai fan, probably across the entirety of the fantasy community. Is this an alarm bell for you, or is this a positive?
Yeah, it's interesting, especially because they've brought in Taylor Gregory again as well. I'm really not sure. I don't think it makes Jack Dupai a trade-in target, if that's what you're asking.
No, more. What do you think Dupai does to Schultz? No, not Schultz. Sorry,
I was
Harris.
like,
sorry, I've got Schultz on the brain.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't have an opinion on this one right now, because I haven't actually really, like, I don't have Harris, and I haven't really been watching her too closely.
It's fair. Fair to not have been watching Gold Coast games very closely. They have been tough to watch.
I feel like one of the more exciting things that happened for the Gold Coast last week was, the game was pretty fairly early, you could say. And in that last quarter, when they threw Harris into the middle, not necessarily for her ruck efforts, which she'd been putting in throughout the game, but just as a pure midfielder. I think that's interesting to see where they see her development going. So
yeah, and they are kind of, they've dropped a midfielder in Ella Smith, who has definitely had CBAs in the past. So I think there's a reasonable world where that might open up maybe 20% CBAs for Harris. And they did actually talk at the beginning of the season about Harris being thrown into the midfield if she's been quiet, which was definitely true against Sydney. I at the moment, I think if you've got both, I'd be leaning towards fielding Harris over Dunlop.
Yeah.
We didn't really talk about Dunlop earlier, but I think that Ali Morfitt will absolutely dominate that matchup. Unless anyone else has got any other players they wanted to talk about specifically, we'll move across to the Western Bulldogs against Hawthorn. A few changes here. Kaylee Kimber goes out for the Western Bulldogs, and in comes forward/ruck Annalie McKee. And then Hawthorn have dropped Jess Vukic and Lavinia Cox, and in come Jenna Richardson back from injury, and then also debutant Ellie Simons. Jono, I'm going to throw to you on this. Fantasy prospects for Ellie Simons, someone to keep a watch on, probably a low scorer, low kind of time on ground, possibly low job security, or is this someone that could have potential, to be like in our sides at some point?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting call from the Hawks because I think Jess Vukic is pretty solid. Like I don't think she's been poor by any means. So I think it's a great sign, I suppose, that's who's been kicked out of the side for Ellie Simons. So positive signs there. I've never seen her necessarily as a big fantasy player. I think she comes from more of the basketball convert, like less of a junior footballer as a youngster and more of a recent code switcher. But a lot of talent and can tackle. So it's pretty rare that you have a 300k ruck pop up, and we've got two this week. My question is, let's say you've got a Dunlop or someone on your bench that you're not happy with and you're trying to find that extra 80k to get a trade done. I can see a world where I'd take this risk, just because if it does work out, it's going to be great. And if it doesn't, you end up with someone scoring 30 to 40, which is what a lot of the rucks are doing anyway. So I wouldn't necessarily think it's a must jump on, but I wouldn't go against anyone, just looking to get that 92K off of Dunlop.
Yeah, that's a good call. So looking just what the number she was able to put up in the last 2 seasons of the Coates League at Dandenong. So 18 disposals, 2 marks, 16 hitouts, 5 tackles in 2023, and then 17 disposals, 11 hitouts, nearly 2 marks, and 6.3 tackles. I don't have some game-by-game data for last year, but I will say that the last 2 games she played for Dandenong in 2023 scored 101 and 126 with 25 and 20 disposals and a combined 12 tackles. So there's definitely some scoring pedigree there, and was noted in the draft crop as being highly athletic. I think the point you rightly bring, Jono, is I'm not sure on her job security just with Jess Vukic, who was a very highly rated draft prospect. And she didn't even go into the draft, did she? Was she a pre-draft priority signing?
She was like pick 45 for us.
It's not Simons.
Vukic. Yeah, Vukic was a pre-draft signing for sure. Yeah.
So very highly rated in her draft year is the player that Simons comes in for. So I'm concerned on job security. But it's a name that I'll definitely be watching, having now had a bit of a look at that draft scoring pedigree, particularly in 2023. There's clearly some capability there.
Yeah, she's a good bit shorter than a lot of the rucks in the game. So if they're putting her into the middle, I think it's definitely a sign that it's the athleticism they're looking for.
Yeah, only 178 centimetres, which is shorter than the other player that I think could debut at some point for the Hawks, and will probably be their next debutant, if I had to guess, in Daisy Flockhart, who's a midfielder, but who is 179 centimetres. So definitely going to be some height coming through. I think there's a couple of really cheap options that I'm very interested in this game. So Sarah Pousty scored well, had a better role last week. Definitely is a great rookie if you've already got her. Possibly someone you could jump on for some quick catch. I don't love the matchup. But then the player that has been on the tips of our tongues all week, possibly only surpassed by Ash Woodland, in Laura Stone. John, I will never forgive you for talking me out of trading her in after you suggested that Hayley McLaughlin was going to be the player who'd score better and get the better role. I'm outraged.
I did say Laura Stone had the role and McLaughlin had the form coming in. That's two different things. I never suggested that Stone wasn't going to have a better role than McLaughlin.
I choose to believe what I want to believe in this instance. I think she's a great target, and I would love to be able to upgrade Kosh to Stone personally. It might be that it's actually Darcy Vesio who goes out in place instead of Kosh, just for cash. But I think that, and you can speak to this as a Hawthorn fan, she looked to have played an excellent game from a football sense, and that married up with the fantasy score. I can't imagine that many Hawks fans or Dan Webster would be disappointed with her performance specifically, even if the game itself last week wasn't exactly the kind of high-quality stuff we've seen or come to expect in the last year and a bit from the Hawks.
Yeah, no, I would argue for large chunks of that, at least the first half, she was probably our best midfielder. And that's, I mean, with Emily Bates in the side, that's as high praise as I can give anyone, really. So
it's hard to play well, though, when you're giving away about 17 free kicks a minute, as Batesy was on the weekend.
Well, Bates gave away 6, Laura Stone gave away 4. It's those free kicks, So I think it's something that I can see her having quite a high ceiling if she keeps this role that she's got with such high midfield minutes. Of
the kind of sub 500k forwards, is she the preferred target?
Yeah.
Average of 54, 491k, over and above Ellie Hampson, who you were very keen to spruik last week and still improved on the week prior, scored a 52.
Yeah, I think Hampson was good last week, but I think Laura Stone was heads and shoulders above everyone else in that price bracket.
Agreed. And would be, if you are short of cash or if you do already have Woodland, I think there's a very real world where you use Bonnie Toogood down to Woodland as a cash grab if you need to upgrade elsewhere. And I think that's, or you could go, if you didn't trade out Ange Stannard down to Laura Stone. Be a great trade this week. Moving along to the Sunday games, Collingwood up against Narm. For Narm, it's Wotherspoon, Pisano and Rigoni in and out go Blaine Mackin, Liv Purcell and Sinead Goldrick, all of whom are injured. And then for the Pies, Ruby Slusher out with a concussion and in comes Nell Morris-Dalton for her first game in 2 seasons. So she missed all of last year with a back injury. It's very, very unfortunate as one of the few kind of dedicated forwards with some experience playing as a tall for Collingwood. There's a lot of things to discuss from this game. First and foremost, you kind of talked about it a bit on the pod, Jono. Shelley Heath, you revelled in the injury to Liv Purcell.
Oh, no, take that down a notch. I think Heath has definitely got the role back, though, and I'm hoping we're going to return to that 70% midfield time that she had in that first round.
Is it a little bit concerning, though, that 2 other outside players in Goldrick and Mackin are now both also out? Particularly Goldrick probably is the one player that plays the most Shelley Heathish role in defence. Is that any alarm bells for you? I personally think that there's a world where it's not the full 70% we saw in week 1. It might be something close to 50-50 midfield and in defence.
Yeah, look, I'm not 100% confident on it in the sense that, I think if she's getting that full midfield role, I think she's an undervalued player. And I think if she had the role she had in that first half last week, then you almost want to trade her out. It's a real variance. I think at the moment, if I want to, since I've got her in the side, I'm happy to keep her and watch her play this week. I think that she's going to score well. But yeah, for sure, it's a bit of a worry, but I still think they've got so many outside runners. I mean, Chaplin off halfback was providing a lot of run and dash. Paxman and McNamara on the wings, do a lot there as well. I think they're probably shorter on inside midfielders options than they are on outside runners.
That's a fair point. I wouldn't be shocked as well. They've named Riley Wotherspoon, came in, played most of last year as a forward, but is of a size and a nature that suggests she's a bit of a utility option for them, both for halfback and in the midfield. She'll be someone that I will be fascinated to see where they spend most of their time. Mel, do you want to talk about Ash Centra or do you want to talk about Eden Zanker / Taylor Harris priorities?
Well, firstly, I think you missed that Mel jumped off because she had food on the way.
Missed that.
And yeah, food. When there's food involved, I think that's Mel's priority in all circumstances.
I was sitting here going, I feel like Mel's not had said anything for a while. I should throw a question specifically to her because I worry that I hadn't given her an option to speak. Well, Jono, then, I'll throw to you on Ash Centra. Ruby Slusher out. If you are in a position where you didn't trade her out last week, she's made a little bit, she's just slightly better off now. Break even's probably come back down a little bit. Is she someone that you use to get extra cash if you are looking for that? What is her price? But let's say it's roughly 100K to be able to afford a Woodland, or are you holding because the role might be increased midfield time again this week?
I think I'm holding for the role. So there were some real moments last week out of that midfield that Centra was such an impressive clearance player. And I think against Melbourne, it's going to be a struggle. And really, the next 4 games for the Pies are incredibly challenging. So I do think there's a bit of a cap on how well she can go. But I think she's going to be playing midfield for the next few rounds. And if that lasts, I think eventually she's going to get up to, I don't know, maybe scoring some 60s. And her price has got a lot further to go because of that first round score. She's basically just on par for what she started the season. There's a lot of other players that I think don't have as much cash to go. So I think if I was looking to make that extra 100K that you could get from Centra, I think there's a lot of other players that I'd probably go first on our benches.
Because, yeah, well, I'm kind of looking at my bench and there's not a lot of players that I'm like confident that I want to trade. I don't have Centra at the moment, but yeah, I agree that the role will be better. I do wonder though if this Melbourne matchup might possibly be one of the worst for Centra, who are still, as much as I saw some moments again last week, probably more, maybe double what we saw against Carlton. I'm still not sure about the foot speed yet, and I'm still not sure about the pace of play.
Yeah, it's certainly one that I think the fixture is awful. You can't probably get a worse 4-game run than what they've got.
And for those that haven't got the fixture up in front of them, Collingwood go Melbourne, North, Sydney, Hawthorn. It is about as bad as you can get in that Melbourne and Sydney play similarly, and it's a lot about speed of play, and that really doesn't advantage Centra. And then North and Hawthorn, both dominant midfield teams. North can boat race. They can outbeat you at the stoppage with strength, speed, however you want. And then Hawthorn were possibly the toughest matchup of all for all midfielders last year. So I wouldn't argue against anyone trading Centra out. But I think, and if Ruby Slasher hadn't been injured, I'd have been there 100% to do it. I think this is a really tough matchup, but the combination of Slasher out and then Nell Morris-Dalton coming into play in the forward probably just gives enough of a boost to be able to hold Centra this week. And one thing, we don't need to discuss it too much, I'm fascinated to see what the addition of Dalton does to the ruck balance, because a lot of what's been happening at the moment is Imogen Barnett is a CBA ruck, but then ruck contests have still been split roughly 50-50 with Sabs Frederick. And it's kind of, if there are going to change, Sabs Frederick does start forward. Very curious to see whether that balance changes now. Sabs is freed up to play more in the middle. I'm not saying I have an answer on this. It's just something that I know I'm going to be actively watching for, particularly for Barnett's purposes, because she is a popular trade at the moment. Moving along to the next game, we've got the Kangaroos up against Walyalup. For the Kangaroos, in come Emma Carney and Jenna Bruton. So a wealth of experience coming in, and then out go Amy Gavin Mangan and Ariana Hetherington. And then for Walyalup, it's Tanisha Kikowak, Indiana West, and Joanne Craig in. And out go Ash Brazel, Georgie Brisbane, and Gabrielle Biedenweg-Webster. First up, and I think it's something we discussed earlier in the week, Jono, just kind of between us, the North injury list, possibly the most interesting of the week, for the sheer volume of experienced players they have still to return. Notably, a couple of names that we were expecting to probably make their way back in from the injured list haven't. So that's Bella Eddy and Emma King. But we have seen the return of Carney and Bruton. Carney coming back in, I'm personally of the view she'll spend probably pretty low time on ground.
Yeah, I can see something like 60%.
Yeah, and I know that they're going to be looking to try and manage her to be as fit as she can for finals, and they've banked enough percentage and also just have such a good side that I don't think they'd be extremely concerned if Carney doesn't have to play the full game. I don't think she's a required player to win in this instance. Do you I think that this impacts the likelihood that Tessa Boyd stays in the side in the best 21 long term. Is it enough to trade though? Is it enough to avoid trading in? Sorry.
Oh yeah, this is sort of my dilemma this week, is that I do think Tessa Boyd was a chance to miss this week and is almost certainly gone next week if both Bella Eddy and Emma King come into the team. The thing is, to me, that doesn't necessarily preclude the trade because, again, I'm looking at my team and barring a number of injuries, I think I'm going to have the same concern next week about my rookies where I'm thinking, geez, they've all got a lot of cash to make still. who am I trading out? So I don't mind the idea that if Tessa Boyd plays and Carney has lowish time on ground, then Boyd could still score very, very well. Could go another 50 to 60, and then I make another 150K, and then I can move her on. And I like that quick cash transition. I'm not sure exactly how committed I am to it, but I think for the moment it's in my trade plans is bringing in Boyd. And I like the idea that, worst case, it's a red dot that happens during a North game and I can potentially do a loop sometime. So I think there are worse scenarios than bringing in Boyd and she doesn't make it into the team next week.
Yeah, and it's still going to be a pretty solid matchup. We saw how much Fremantle were how much Fremantle were dominated in transition and gave up so many intercept marks. I heard this stat from Kate McCarthy on the W wrap-up this week. It was nearly a quarter of the time Brisbane were able to transition the ball from D50 to forward 50 or to shots on goal.
Yeah,
I believe the league average is something like 9%.
Yeah.
So that is how much Brisbane absolutely dominated, and we saw it with good scores from Brie Conan and from what's her name, Nat Grider.
Grider as well. And I don't know how much she moves around the ground a bit, but Charlie Mullins also scored pretty well. Ellinger was over 60. I think really all of the defenders did all right off that half-back line.
They did indeed. But I will say this. I think planning to trade in Boyd is fine, but don't be doing it under the auspices of having someone that you're confident will be best 21 long term. So you need to be able to pivot off and not be at a risk if you have to field her every week. Moving on then to the final game of the round. We've got Brisbane up against Carlton. Only one change in this game. In comes Shifra O'Connell, an Irish utility, probably a tall defender as far as I'm aware. And out goes Mia Austin, which is a massive shock. It's the third time in a row, kind of a taller forward that we probably would have expected to be a lock in the best 21 hasn't been named to play. Last week, notably, it was Beck Privatelli, who's still not been named, by the way. It'll be hard to get dropped from a side that, has forwards kick 7, 3, and 2.
Yeah.
So fair enough that you're probably sitting there, Scott Gowans, going, "Oh, well, I can't drop a forward from this game." But yeah, and it's not particularly fantasy relevant, in terms of the players that we own that Austin is dropped. If you're an unfortunate individual who has done a draft league of some kind or do have Maddie Gearin, I think that's a real concern because I think Gearin becomes a required player forward now, just with the height that is otherwise going to be, and kind of that medium-sized, not kind of mid-tall forward is otherwise not in this side. In terms of the rest of the game, I think that we don't exactly own a large volume of Lions players. I will note that Nisa Dooley has kind of held her spot. She scored well last week. It's a great matchup this week. Are you confident enough in her job security to trade her in? She's probably one of the few forwards that has a really low break even that's sub 400K.
Yeah, well, what I like there is that it's not like the Lions have a lot of outs that are coming back soon. Like I know someone like Poppy Bolts is probably going to jump straight into the squad when they return, but that's still a few weeks away. So I like that aspect. I think the fact that she only had 38% time on ground or something like that, very, very low, which is both good for her scoring, but also a little concerning in terms of who's first to go out if they decide to mix it up a little bit. But yeah. I think there are far worse options out there.
And if you were trying to make some cash this week, particularly with Kosh missing, that hop, skip, and a jump is less than 80K.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to do for a week, but I wouldn't be expecting any job security long term.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all the teams that have been named. Now, there are a stack of questions, and so I'm going to try and get to a handful of them. And apologies if we don't get to all of them. I will at least endeavour to try and answer some before the first lockout First one here, we have one from a former number one hat winner in Bryony Chamberlain. Who are you fielding out of Wrench or O'Shea? I'm 0-2 on this choice so far. Preach, testify.
Yeah.
Even the best coaches struggle with this O'Shea versus Wrench choice.
Yeah, I'm certainly not as high ranked as Bryony's been in the past, but I'm also 0-2 with Wrench and Ott, so I'm having the same dilemma this week.
I'm struggling with this one too. I think Wrench going up against St Kilda feels like the better matchup. But then I also think about the stats that I literally just gave you for defenders against Fremantle, and it's O'Shea. I think the only thing that pushes me away is the volume of defenders in that North squad, because they've got the 5 they've named on field. They've got Ailish Sheeran as well. I do wonder if there's just a little bit less time in defence, maybe some time on the wing, which is a little bit more inconsistent. And I think O'Shea herself has proven to be a very inconsistent scorer across her career. Not to say it's been bad. It's usually just up, down, up, down, up, down. So if it's me, I'm leaning towards Wrench. But I will say this now, I don't do it confidently.
Yeah, I think I'm on a similar mindset there with Wrench.
Moving on, next question. Bales, friend of the pod, has questioned, where should he be getting cash from to upgrade to good? Is it Dunlop to Riggs? Is it Paxi or Neve McLaughlin to Tess Boyd? Or is it Georgie Prespakis to Kate Hoare? I personally believe that it's one of those defenders down to Boyd. If you're still in a position to have Boyd be on the bench this week or next week. But where do you sit, Jono?
So if I was fielding Paxi or Neve McLaughlin as the D5, I think I'd agree with you. My concern for Bales' team in particular is that he'd then be fielding 2 rookies in his defense when I know he's got McLaughlin and Vesey on field in his forward line. So to me, there gets a point where it becomes you're adding a lot of upgrades in the future, and I'd just be mindful of that. So I'd probably be going either Dunlop down to Riggs, but that's more of a structural concern, I think.
And yeah, that's a very fair point. And I think given that structural issue, it's probably Dunlop down to Riggs. I feel like Riggs is a required player at least for 2 to 3 weeks until Belinda Smith gets back. And even after that, I feel like she's someone that's going to get picked every week.
I mean, she was Emma's
it might not
pick of the preseason of all the players at West Coast. So I think that injury aside, I would have her a lock in that side.
Yeah, and also with Beth Schilling down with an injury at the moment, I think that's where I would be leaning if you are trying to search for that additional cash. Okay, here's a question from Carl. Thoughts on Bowers to Hoare, Tonnen to Woodland, and Rashid to Boyd? Keeping Too Good for a loop next week. So this involves holding Bonnie Too Good for 2 weeks at $613K. Given the short length of the AFLW season, first of all, do you think it's acceptable to hold Too Good? And then secondly, what do you think about those trades?
Yeah, so I suppose 2 things. One is that I think 2 weeks is a long time, and that's a 6th of the season that you're holding a player. I would definitely be trying to find a use for that cash. You know, I think in 2 weeks' time, we can always bring Too Good back in if we're liking the run and we're liking what she's going to come up against. So I would be trading personally. The other one is I like the idea of the trades, but I'm very hesitant on Kiara Bowers going out of the side. I know it's a tough matchup, but I mean, Woodland scored all right as a midfielder last week, and I
Darrick did too.
One of those players who can realistically and should be in the conversation for top 5 midfielder come the end of the season. I'd be hesitant about trading someone out who's in that position. So I would trade someone like in my team. I would trade Prespakis first.
Yeah, and I think I'm of the same view. in terms of Hoare as the trade in, I know I threw it out there as something that had been mentioned to me as a trade option. Is it a case of, this is a very good matchup. I think she's going to be a great possible VC option this week if she'd played obviously an earlier game time. Is she the trade target at that point at below $1 million at the moment, just off that bad score in week 1? Or is it wait another week, see how this Melbourne midfield settles, see if they can avoid some injuries, knowing that you do have Richmond and Port Adelaide coming up the week after?
Yeah.
I think she's the best option personally of that sub $1 million mid.
I don't see a better player in that price bracket. I just worry that she's never had a season where she's averaged above 90. And so whilst I imagine that she's going to go better than that over the next little run of games that we've got, we're talking about trading at Kiara Bowers. Her career,
that's always gone
the
well.
Best of any player in the game. It's even higher than Marinoff's. So at some point, there's a limit to as good as Kate Hoare is going to be. We're talking about trading out one of the best players there is.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you and preferring to trade out Prespakis over her. I'm going to fold in another question here from Eliza. If you're trying to generate cash, is it the Prespakis / Bowers trade to Hoare, or is it Watson, or probably Watson, McCormick, McLaughlin down to Boyd as the better trade to generate cash? At the moment, I think I'm currently doing Watson down to a defender.
Yeah.
To generate the cash I need for Too Good. Are you of the same mind?
Yeah, I think so. I think the difference between sort of the best forwards and the best mids, just sort of the middle of the road options, the difference there is a lot greater than I think it is in defense. Our rookies in defense, you look at Beckott, who went 60 odd last week. I think there's a few options who can sort of put up those 55 to 60 scores when the best players are going at 70. The gap's not so big. So I think I'm happy to take the cut there to get the cash. Whilst I think on other lines, it's a little bit trickier to sort of be confident you're going to get those high scores. And if you're wrong, you can see a 40 or you can see something, much, much lower.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. Question here from JD. Which downgrade trade do we prefer? Is it Courtney Murphy to Dunlop or Riggs, or is it Centra to Tessa Boyd? I personally reckon that it is the instant cash boost of Centra to Boyd, just because I feel like Boyd could easily go up even 100K with a bad score this week, just given how well she performed as a 300K last week, scoring that 70 plus.
Yeah, Boyd's definitely a fantastic option. My question to you is, I suppose, more specific to Courtney Murphy, and it's Steph Killer-Wales on the injury list was, 1 to 3 weeks?
Maybe even 1 to 2.
1 to 2 even. Yeah, because that's the concern is, does Murphy only have one more week left to play?
Yes. Well, probably 2 weeks, if I'm being honest. I think throwing Killer up against, off a short rehab period. She's only kind of just re-entered main training. And then using that to go up against Beck Ott would be rash.
Yeah.
And I think that targeting the week after for the Bombers, more likely going up against Mim Strom as the option.
Yeah.
Which is another brutal thing to do. Your first game back off an ACL, you're going to go up against the league's premier ruck. But I feel like the runway for Murphy is 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it is a tough conundrum at the moment.
Yeah. If you're
another question,
then I'd probably go the Centra to Boyd play, run it out a little bit longer. I'd just be conscious that you don't get a lot of 300K rucks coming in too often. So it might be planning to have a donut on the bench in a few weeks. Unless you're going to go Murphy up to someone.
Yeah, I think that's a fair call. And I think by that point, in 1 to 2 weeks, the red dot play for looping purposes we're probably at a spot where that's more acceptable. So you probably don't need a plain 300K
I can see that.
just to kind of get max cash out of it. Question here from Craig, comparing it to trade-in targets in the forward line. It is Taylor Harris and Laura Stone. The prices are pretty different. There's about 160, 170K in between them.
Yeah.
I know that that's a very big price gap to try and bridge when I say, which do you prefer?
Yeah.
But
no,
push comes to shove, who do you like more?
Yeah, it's a good question because I've been doing a bit of a dance this week where sometimes I'm bringing in Tessa Boyd and other times I'm going all the way down to a 300K so that I can afford Harris instead of Stone. And it's been tough going back and forth on that. I think I ended up going with Boyd just because I want to keep the cash going on the other player. And I suppose with Harris is I think the ceiling is much higher, but there's also like getting that consistency out of a key forward. If you get a wet day or something like that, you could end up
or windy
that really
because it is
scoring.
Casey Fields is their home ground. Ever the boon of consistent scoring, just given how windy it is out there.
Yeah.
It's obviously not been played there this week. They're playing Collingwood at Vic Park. But I would also say that from what I saw from anyone not defending Tani Evans last week, the defense looked better against GWS than it had the week prior against Carlton. And it's not as though there isn't some other quality marking options, notably Georgia Garnett in that forward line for GWS. So I would lean Stone just because I feel like the role is still going to be there and she played well enough to be able to justify it.
Yeah, I've settled on Stone. I do think that the way Melbourne deliver that ball inside forward 50 is, worlds above what GWS were doing. But I'm still leaning towards Stone myself.
Yeah. All right, let's see if we can get through a couple more questions and then give people time to finish off their trades before we launch into the first game tonight. Here's one from Sam, and it's a name that we've not discussed at all this week. Is Eloise Jones an option?
It's an interesting question because she did definitely dip off the radar for a while there.
Well, yes, she's been in our fantasy sides way back in the day. Had a 54 against St Kilda, and then had an 80 with 2 goals against Geelong. Given that she's a similar price to Eden Zanker, I'll ask, for a direct comparison. I think that Zanker is a far better option than Jones this week. And just as we've talked about ad nauseum, it feels like, because of Melbourne's run. But would you consider a world where you traded in Elle Jones, given she is someone who can score in a variety of ways and has been more than capable of getting high up the ground in the past?
Yeah, I feel like she's one that's definitely been inconsistent over the years, where I feel like you get the ceiling scores and you get the low scores. I really like the role, and I like that one of the players I was watching that first game so closely was Hannah Munyard, who looked fantastic. And Eloise Jones, plays in, I suppose, a similar way, with that outside run coming off the half forward line. So I don't mind the idea if that's kind of how they've decided to play this year with a bit more pace, because they were definitely lacking it in that first game. So I can see them trying to use some of their quicker players going forward. I just really think the inconsistency is not going to be worth it when you compare it to the Melbourne team, who, I know we're talking about Taylor Harris being inconsistent, but I think that fixture at least should give you a higher ceiling than you're going to see from Jones in the next few rounds.
Yeah. And I think that inconsistency is perfectly encapsulated for Jones in the fact that she had 2 points in the first quarter last week. So a singular contested handball was her only involvement in the quarter, and then went 31, 24 and 23 after that, and kicked 2 goals in the final quarter. So
yeah, there's also
I personally think that Zanker's the better play. And Zanker does have a bit of that midfield role too. And I do think that might continue on that kind of 20% trajectory, just given the fact that they've lost Liv Purcell.
Yeah. And we also, we mentioned that Melbourne have the easiest fixture, but Adelaide have the hardest fixture in the game. Like after this, they go Brisbane, then they play Hawthorn. It's not an easy run for the next little while. I wouldn't.
At least for the next 2 weeks. In 3 weeks, however, they play Gold Coast. At which point, yes, I will actively entertain trading in Caitlin Gould, Eloise Jones.
Sydney, it's up and down. So I don't know.
It was Sydney and then Richmond and West Coast. Personally, I don't think Elle Jones is the forward I'll be targeting by the time we get to the Gold Coast matchup in round 6. It will much more likely be Caitlin Gould. But I like it as an alternative point of consideration. What time are we at? Okay, we'll maybe answer one more question. We've already talked about Shelley Heath and what we think about her role. We talked about that one earlier. Okay, here's one from Nick. Which option? Too Good to Stone, Kosh to Boyd, Watson to Heath? Or B, Watson to Boyd, Wrench or Boyd on field?
Yeah.
Patrikios to Gardner/Riddell, and Too Good to Stone. So Too Good to Stone in both.
Yeah.
Watson out in both.
Mm-hmm.
One of them has Heath coming in, the other Boyd, and then one of them has Kosh going out for Boyd, and the other one has Patrikios to premium mid in Gardner or Riddell.
Yeah. So I think this one, I like the idea of getting rid of a Red Dot and Kosh, but I think the opportunity to get up to a Gardner and Riddell, I would be taking that and probably leaning Riddell.
Yes. I think if you've got the cash to go Riddell, I think that she is the player to pick.
Yeah.
I kind of talked about it in Fantasy Fix this week. Riddell is someone that I think will benefit greatly if Jazz Garner's extra forward time, is something that continues even when she's not being tagged. Although actually it's probably very late for me to mention this, but I did say that Liz McGrath was potentially a trade-in target in Fantasy Fix this week. Please know that has now radically changed as a result of Sarah Lakai being picked. Do not trade in Liz McGrath this week. And on that fascinating final endpoint, we are going to finish up. Jono, do you have an idea on what your trades are now? Are you willing to announce them, or do you want to keep those close to your chest now that you are rocketing up the rankings?
It's way too early in the season for me to consider this is going to last. So I think for the moment, still sticking with Bonnie Too Good to Woodland, McLaughlin to Stone, and McCormick down to Tess Boyd. How about yourself?
Fair. I'm doing something similar. I'm going Watson down to Beck Ott, Bonnie Too Good up to Ash Woodland, and then I'm going Darcy Vesio sideways to Laura Stone. I don't know how much time DV is going to have to actually get the ball this week going up against Brisbane. That is a downright dreadful matchup for her, for them.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was 1K short of being able to do these trades and instead be able to take Kosh up to Stone.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
Absolutely kills me. So that's kind of where I'm leaning at the moment. It does bank me some cash, does potentially free up a bunch of interesting trades for me to do next week, possibly bringing in another midfielder. I'm looking at Kate Hoare. She's very tempting at the moment.
I think my big hope with Vesio is the Hawks were definitely leaving that pocket open for the short kick, and that is the big reason that they weren't playing on out of the goal square. Brisbane can kick a lot of behinds, and if they shut down that option, then they're going to be forced to sort of run out and kick it long, which I'm very much hoping for.
That's very fair, and a very, very likely possibility. And there's a very real world that it could be, Blaine Bogue out instead. But at the moment, that's where I am going. And I think the actual other thing that I probably should have mentioned is the concern that I have with DV is the inclusion for the second week of Amelia Velado, who was playing a vastly similar role. And I must say, on TV, looked too damn similar. Yeah, well, I hope everyone has enjoyed. Good luck for first lockout, which is in just under 20 minutes. Hopefully, you've made the right trades. Hopefully, you've managed to weather the Bonnie Toogood storm. And you'll hear from us early next week with our regular podcast.
Yeah, good luck everyone this weekend. Hope the scores keep as high as they were last week.
And I hope, Jono, that you are slightly worse and I'm slightly better. All right, thanks everyone. See ya.